It's so nice to have you always with us here on TV Africa. Welcome. My name is Najma Lima, but first are the headlines. Among buys 500 iron sheets for OPM to save innocent face. Youths must be involved in SDGs and NDP implementation, says UN Resident Coordinator. Ghana's Herbert Mensah to vie for Africa Rugby presidency. Welcome once again. Now the news in detail. United Nations Resident Coordinator in Uganda, Susan Ngozi Namondo, has said that youths must engage and fully involve in the Sustainable Development Goals and the National Development Plan, since this cannot be fully achieved without their active participation. We have more.
Susan made the remarks while closing the 5 days training for the African United Nations Youth Delegate Program, where 20 best selected youths out of 500 acquired knowledge on how things are done at the national, regional, continental and United Nations level, but also to select the 2 youths that will be part of the Uganda's delegation that will represent the country at the UN General Assembly later this year. Susan said that their involvement will help them benefit and also solve replication going forward, before advising them to learn about the structure and the system of the world, which requires a lot of reading. United Nations Resident Coordinator in Uganda, Susan Ngozi Namondo, also revealed that Uganda is still behind on SDGs because of some global challenges like COVID-19 pandemic, the war in Ukraine, which increased commodity prices, inflation and debt issues, the country's internal challenges, hence affecting development plans. Frederick Browers, the project coordinator at CRISIP Browers, said that after the assessment, they will select 2 candidates who will represent Uganda to the UN General Assembly in New York. However, all the 20 trained fellows will keep engaging with them, doing outreach campaigns across the country, presenting the program, but also gathering what the youths want to be represented at national and UN General Assembly. He said that they want the youths to be champions for development and transformation, to propagate the gospel of the Sustainable Development Goals, and to be able to work within Uganda's and regional development frameworks to take development to the grassroots, particularly among the young people.
Uganda People's Congress UPC Party President Jimmy Akena has asked the government to provide quality education to Ugandans across the country. Akena made the demand as he addressed journalists in Kampala during party celebrations for 63 years anniversary.
In his address to the media at their party headquarters in Kampala, Jimmy Akena, the UPC party president, who also doubles as the son of former President Dr. Milton Obote, said quality education is a right which has to be enjoyed by all Ugandans, irrespective of their geographical location.
The dream on quality education was to make education available to the citizens wherever they were. Hence, when you hear UPC slogans, everybody, you talk about everybody in Uganda, should have access to these services. Everywhere, these services must be in all corners of Uganda and not limited in a particular area.
Akena's remarks came at a time Uganda is celebrating 25 years of universal primary education, which started in 1997. According to Akena, UPC shall strive hard to ensure that every Ugandan has access to quality services.
Painful that in 2023, some of the promises or the hopes of 1962 are not being realized, but that is the reality. And therefore, we have a task to make sure that all our citizens, wherever they are able to access the basic services. Those are the social, it's basically the social contract which us as UPC feel is important as a party and a government must have with its citizens.
Akena further asked the government to provide decent public medical care, as most government health facilities lack sufficient medicine.
The provision of decent medical care is still a pipe dream, as most of the government health facilities lack sufficient medicines and insufficient medical staff, who at times go for long periods without being adequately remunerated, even though the overall ratio of medical personnel to patients is still low.
As UPC marks 63 years of existence, Jimmy Akina said the party has realized the remarkable achievements, as he explained.
The party is in its final stages of its preparation for holding its National Council, whereby members are expected to debate and come up with workable propositions to tackle the underlying reasons for youth unemployment and underemployment, labor export, food security, Uganda's comparative advantage in agriculture, amongst others, in line with the UPC constitutional provision.
The Speaker of Parliament, Anita Among, has said she has purchased 500 iron sheets to be returned to the office of the Prime Minister. This comes weeks after her name appeared among top government officials implicated in the diversion of iron sheets meant for the vulnerable people in the Karamoja sub-region. Recently, the Speaker confirmed that the iron sheets had been delivered to her constituency, but said she had ordered they be donated to schools in Bukedia. While chairing Wednesday's plenary, Among told Parliament that she had decided to purchase 500 iron sheets and return them to the OPM to clear her name out of accusations that she had diverted the iron sheets meant for Karamoja's vulnerable people. It should be remembered that in January, the Minister for Karamoja Affairs, Goreti Chitutu, requested 12,200 iron sheets through the OPM, claiming they were to be given to Karamoja vulnerable people. However, it was later discovered that the iron sheets had fraudulently ended up in the hands of top government officials. There have since been calls from members of the public and the affected beneficiaries for the officials involved in the iron sheets saga to be reprimanded. The latest development comes days after police spokesperson Fred Enanga confirmed that they had kicked off investigations into the mismanagement of relief items, including iron sheets and goats meant for the vulnerable in Karamoja. Let's take a break. We shall be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching TV Africa News, The Right to Know. Ethiopia's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister hosted on Wednesday the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. In the first ever visit to Niger by a U.S. Secretary of State, Blinken will also meet President Mohamed Bazoum, the Foreign Minister Hassoumi Massoudeh in Niamey. We have more.
The U.S. top diplomat, who is said to visit two countries on the continent, will first meet with Ethiopian federal officials and Tigrayan representatives in Addis Ababa. He will discuss the implementation of the peace deal that ended the war in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region, as well as humanitarian support. The conflict led the U.S. to suspend some preferential trade agreements with Ethiopia, which could also be on the agenda. At the start of the meeting, Blinken said that it was very good to be back in Africa, especially to be in Ethiopia at a very important moment of hope given the peace in the north that is taking hold and that continues to move forward. According to the U.S. Department of State press statement, Blinken will also meet humanitarian partners and civil society actors to discuss humanitarian assistance delivery, food security, and human rights. While there, Blinken will also meet with the African Union Commission chairperson.
Moving on, Zimbabweans in voting units across Harare formed waiting lines on Wednesday to register for the country's forthcoming polls. In 5 months, Zimbabweans will vote in harmonized presidential and legislative elections. Ahead of the vote, whose dates have not been scheduled yet, Zimbabwe Electoral Commission has launched a 10-day registration blitz. to enable those intending to register as voters to obtain critical documents like birth certificates and national identity cards. Peter Sigauke, voter, he had gone to register to vote because he wants the leader to stay in power so that he can improve the economy and create jobs. For Molinda Chigwada, this is a chance for a better Zimbabwe, and is hoping for the better Zimbabwe because every vote counts. Ahead of the elections, main political parties and leaders have already started preparations in Inesta with rallies and various campaign activities. Many avoid uttering the name Nelson Chamisa in public when talking about the main rival to President Emmerson Mnangagwa. His Citizens Coalition for Change party is bracing for a rough presidential and legislative election campaign against President Emmerson Mnangagwa. Away from that, foreign students in Tunisia demand action from the government as part of racist attacks and comments by President Kais Saied about illegal migrants. The organization that represents sub-Saharan students denounced over 400 arrests.
According to Christian Kongwang, president of ASAT, an association representing sub-Saharan African students in Tunisia, the numbers are quite fluctuating and there are 400 arrests. Kongwang added that there are more than 40 to 50 students who remained in detention in police stations during the last 2 or 3 weeks and therefore went directly to prison. At least 100 students made emergency repatriations, mostly to Mali, Ivory Coast, Guinea and Niger, according to the representative. Sub-Saharan African students make up the overwhelming majority of international students in private education sector and a significant proportion at public institutions, according to the Ministry of Education representative.
Security vehicles and barricades surrounded the home of a Senegalese opposition leader on Wednesday as authorities banned rallies on the eve of a trial that could determine his eligibility to contest next year's presidential election. A cordon of police in riot gear barred the way to Ousmane Sonko's vehicle at the end of his street outside his home in the capital Dakar, according to footage broadcast live on social networks. Security forces fired tear gas at reporters interviewing a member of parliament who had come to support Sonko. Sonko's confinement comes amid growing tensions a year ahead of the presidential election, raising fears of violence in a state reputed for stability. Sonko, a firebrand politician who came third in the last presidential election, is expected in court on Thursday after being sued by Tourism Minister Mamembaye Niang for defamation, insult and forgery. The two legal affairs could determine whether Sonko will be allowed to run in the presidential elections set for February 2024. Sonko claims the charges are part of a plot to torpedo his chances. He has also claimed that President Macky Sall intends to override the constitution and run for a third term. Let's once again take a quick break. We shall be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching TV Africa News, the right to know. In our business news today, according to figures released this Wednesday by Statistics South Africa, retail sales in the country fell 0.8% year-on-year in January after falling by a revised 0.5% in December. On a month-on-month basis, sales increased 1.5%.
The numbers are relevant as they offer an insight into consumer demand in Africa's most industrialized economy. The statistics agencies say that sales in the 3 months to the end of January were down 0.2% compared with the same period last year. South Africa's economic growth outlook is bleak this year, with crippling power cuts seen hurting businesses of all sizes and keeping inflation high. In retail, trading has improved to pre-COVID levels. However, consumers are experiencing increased financial pressure due to the higher inflation and interest rates.
In our health news today, the president of Malawi, Lazarus Chakwera, launched an international appeal to help in the aftermath of the devastation caused by Cyclone Freddy. The storm killed at least 225 people. Speaking in the capital Blantyre on Wednesday, President Chakwera appealed for help and said that what Cyclone Freddy has done is to pull them back even when they were trying to rebuild because of past tragedies. The president appealed to the international community to look at them with such favor because they need help in terms of people that have been rescued, who have lost everything in addition to shelter, clothing and food. It was the second time in less than 3 weeks that the country was battered by Cyclone Freddy that also affected neighboring Mozambique. Many people perished in landslides that swept away flimsy homes built on slopes. Flood levels remained high in some areas, hampering emergency efforts. And finally, with our sports news today, Herbert Mensah, sports administrator and president of the Ghana Rugby Football Union, has announced his candidacy for president of the World Rugby's African Association, Rugby Africa, the governing body of rugby in Africa. Ahumuza with more.
The president will be elected for a period of 4 years, commencing immediately after the results announced by the Executive Committee on 18th March 2023. This will also be the first time in the history of Rugby Africa that elections will be contested. Mensah was nominated by the Nigeria Rugby Football Federation to run for president. Mensah, a current member of the Africa Rugby Executive Committee, is also an accomplished businessman with many years of experience in the business and sports sectors in Africa. In 2014, Mensah took the helmet at the Ghana Rugby Football Union, where he significantly increased awareness around the sport while injecting much enthusiasm for players and officials, as well as encouraging the youth to participate in rugby through numerous initiatives and activities. He was instrumental in spearheading the national teams to the World Series after they won the West African competition before moving on to the African Championship. 2023 Rugby World Cup will be held in France from September to October. Mensah hopes to use this world-class platform to collaborate with leading international rugby bodies and other associations to raise awareness around African rugby while gaining much-needed support for the sport.
That was the news. Thank you for always keeping it TV Africa. Please do stay tuned.